This movie kicks off in Vienna, Austria, at night. Vienna is a city famous for its culture and opera shows. Over here, there's a Turkish girl named Özge Dorgul. She works as a taxi driver to make a living. Özge is known for being tough and self-reliant. She even learned kickboxing to protect herself while driving passengers. Life's been tough on her, so she's not much of a smiler. One night, as Özge is heading back to the taxi stand after finishing work, things get a bit crazy. Two guys purposely park their car in the middle of the road, blocking her taxi. She honks her horn to tell them to move, but those two dudes couldn't care less. So, Özge gets out and tells them the road isn't a parking spot. Unfortunately, they find it all amusing and start laughing. Özge loses her cool and leading her to confront one of them physically. The other guy, seeing his friend getting a beatdown, eventually convinces the battered man to leave the scene. Meanwhile, in a lower middle-class apartment on the outskirts of the city, there's a lady who works the night shift, and she's got a mysterious guy as her client. Suddenly, he gets violent and starts causing her harm. At the same time, Özge has just reached the taxi stand. Her boss, Samir, comes up to her, and he's worried about his wife, Rania. He hasn't been able to reach her. Samir thinks Özge might know where Rania is since they're cousins and close. Özge hasn't heard from Rania all day, though. She tells Samir she doesn't know where she is and heads home. When Özge gets to her simple apartment, she goes straight to the kitchen to cook some dinner. But then she senses something strange outside her place. It piques her curiosity. She checks through her window and is horrified to see a woman being brutally attacked by a mysterious guy near her apartment. It's her neighbor, who's an entertainer. Özge is scared out of her wits, and she realizes the killer is staring right at her. In a panic, she quickly closes her window. She's terrified and worried for her safety after witnessing this murder, so she calls the police, thinking the killer might come after her. Not long after, the police and a team who investigate stuff arrived at the crime scene. But two detectives, Christian Steiner and Petrovich, started to think that Özge might be the perpetrator instead of just being a witness. They found out about her past trouble with the law related to drugs. So, Christian and Petrovich stopped asking her questions and left her apartment without offering to keep her safe, even though she could be a target because of what she saw. The next day, Özge felt unsafe and didn't trust the police anymore because of those threats. So, she decided to sharpen her self-defense skills at the boxing gym, where she usually trained. On that day, her coach, Ilhan, who's a pro kickboxer, had his friend come over to spar with one of his students, Milan. Ilhan picked Özge to spar with Milan, who didn't seem to think much of her and didn't even want to wear headgear, even though he was going to spar with a woman. Özge saw Milan underestimating her and decided not to wear headgear too. Ilhan tried to remind her to play fair. During a match, Özge started throwing some serious punches and kicks, and Milan couldn't keep up. He even tried to sneak in a hit from behind when she wasn't looking, but it didn't work. Özge dodged his attack and countered with elbow and knee strikes. Ilhan and his friend had to step in to stop the match, and he scolded Özge for using moves that were off limits. Frustrated with being blamed, Özge left the gym and went back home. Back at her place, Rania surprised Özge by saying that Samir was looking for her. So, Özge went with Rania to Samir's house. When Samir got home and found out Rania had come back, he was pretty mad. Samir was really possessive of Rania because she used to work as a sex worker before they got married, trying to support her daughter, Unda. That's why he always got suspicious when Rania went out without notice and couldn't be reached. Meanwhile, Özge just stayed quiet while they argued and played with Unda. After completing her duty of escorting her cousin, Özge went back to her own apartment. Later that night, when Özge was getting ready to chill, she heard some weird noises in the hallway outside her place. She got up to check because she started freaking out when someone tried to force open her door. As she peeked through the peephole, she was shocked to see someone peeping into her room. Once the intruder gave up and left, Özge felt like her life was in danger. She decided to go to her parents' place for a bit. Unfortunately, her relationship with her family seemed strained, and she wasn't welcomed warmly by her father and older brother. So, Özge dropped the idea of staying there, and asked Eelhunt for some help with the place for a few days. Eelhunt, still upset about what happened in the kickboxing match, turned her down and told her to go calm down in a public restroom. Right then, Ozj got a call from Rania, who told her that she and Oda got kicked out by Samir. So she brought her daughter to Ozj's place, which she had left unlocked. During their chat, Rania asked why the lights in Ozj's apartment weren't working and thought maybe Ozj hadn't paid the electric bill. This freaked Ozj out, and she urgently told Rania to get out of her place because she realized the killer had made it inside. But Rania didn't listen. She was busy fixing the kitchen lights and didn't notice the killer sneaking up on her. Sadly, this led to Ozj's cousin's death. The killer saw Ozj's ID card on the table and realized he'd made a mistake. Meanwhile, Ozj, hearing Rania's scared voice on the phone, called the police in a panic and then rushed back to her apartment to check on her cousin and niece. A little later, the police started investigating the crime scene where Rania had been brutally murdered. Ozj was at the police station giving her statement and saw Oda with Christian. She quickly took her niece away from there. Christian was worried about them, knowing the killer was still a threat. So he decided to take them to social services, hoping they could find a safer and more comfy place. But when Ozj got to social services and saw the room they'd be sharing, she changed her mind. She decided to leave with Unda and went to Samir's taxi company office. Ozj talked to Samir and convinced him to take care of his stepdaughter so Unda could have a better place to live. Samir agreed out of kindness. Ozj felt relieved and left the office to get back to work and pick up passengers. Not too long after Ozj started driving around the streets, she picked up a guy in her taxi who seemed kind of shady. She kept a close eye on him in the back seat because she felt something wasn't right, and her suspicion turned out to be true. Out of nowhere, this mysterious guy attacked her, trying to strangle her. Turns out this passenger was the same killer who was after Ozj because she had seen him murder that female entertainer. In that moment, Ozj couldn't control her taxi properly. She swerved all over the road, almost putting other drivers in danger. She fought back as best as she could, and her taxi ended up flipping over, throwing the killer out. Ozj got hurt in the crash, but some people on the street came to her rescue. Strangely, she refused help from everyone, and somehow managed to escape from the killer, who survived the accident. While running away, the killer tried to attack her again with a knife when they were on a bridge. Ozj kept dodging him until she felt trapped and jumped into the river. A few days later, Ozj woke up in the hospital and Christian, the detective on the case, told her she had been in a coma. He wanted her to help describe the attacker's face to the police, but Ozj, who had a lot of anger towards the police, chose to stay silent. This really frustrated Christian. On another occasion, Samir came to see Ozj in the hospital. He told her he had left Oda with Ozj's parents because he couldn't take care of Rania's daughter all by himself. But Ozj didn't want Oda to grow up with her family, so she secretly left the hospital at night and went to her parents' place to take Oda with her. Her dad didn't like that and even slapped Ozj. This made her even more angry at him because he had abandoned her and her siblings in the past and mistreated their mom. Before she left with Oda, Ozj also tried to convince her mom to come along, but her mom got mad and told Ozj to leave. In the middle of heavy rain, Ozj was feeling lost because she didn't know where to take Oda. She suddenly remembered Christian, the detective she trusted. So she decided to go to his house for help. But when she got there, Christian explained that he couldn't let Oda stay because he was already taking care of his dad, Carl, who had dementia. He wanted to get social services to look after Oda instead. Ozj firmly rejected this proposal and left right away. Christian felt bad when he saw Ozj and Oda with nowhere to go, so he changed his mind and let them stay at his house. He even quickly got a baby bottle for Oda, which made Ozj wonder if he had a child himself. Christian then admitted he used to have a kid, but they lived with his ex-wife after they got divorced. He also told Ozj about the serial killer who had been in the news. The police were hunting him down because he had killed several women the same way. It was a mystery why the killer targeted must-lean women who worked as entertainers. So far, 8 women had been victims of this guy. The next morning, before Ozg went to work, Christian reminded her not to leave his house because she was being watched by the police. They thought she had kidnapped Oda, but Ozg got bored and decided to take Oda for a walk in the park anyway. While they were out, a police officer got suspicious because Ozg was pushing a baby stroller. The officer came up to her and asked for her ID. But Ozg got worried about getting arrested, so she attacked the officer right there and then ran back to Christian's house. When Christian got home and saw what happened, he was pretty mad at Ozg for not following his warning. On another occasion, Ozg noticed a Quran in Christian's house and started reading it. She told Christian about some verses in the Quran that she thought might be related to the killer. According to Ozg, the killer misunderstood these verses and believed he was doing the right thing by purifying sinful Muslim women through his actions. But just as they were getting into the killer's mindset, Petrovich suddenly showed up at Christian's place. Ozg hurriedly hid Oda to keep her from being found out, while Christian tried to convince Petrovich that the baby bottle on the table was for his dad, who had dementia. He even got his dad to drink from it. One morning, Ozg accidentally saw Christian taking care of his dad, and that made her start falling for him. So when night came, she tried to be seductive by wearing sexy clothes and invited him to sleep together. From that moment on, they got closer and Ozg began to feel happy again, even smiling. One day, Christian and Petrovich got a tip that the person behind the murders of the female entertainers worked at the UN office in Vienna. They rushed over to the UN office and started asking questions to a guy named Said El-Hadari, who they suspected. Said answered their questions casually, but when Christian asked about an injury on Said's forehead, he started getting nervous, especially when Christian called Ozg on his dad's phone and showed Said her face. Said realized his disguise was blown and grabbed Christian's phone. He attacked Petrovich, hurting him badly, and then ran off. Christian tried to stop him but couldn't, so he called his team for help to rescue Petrovich, who had a serious neck injury. While Said had managed to escape, Ozg hopped into Carl's car and headed towards the UN office. She spotted Said running along the road and decided to take a different route to catch him. When she saw him entering a train station, she quickly parked her car and chased after him on foot. Luckily, thanks to surveillance cameras, she found Said inside a train. Without wasting a moment, she got on the same train and found him among other passengers. Ozg attacked him, hitting him multiple times, but the other passengers stepped in and stopped her, allowing Said to slip away when the train stopped at a station. Said then went to a station restroom and used Christian's phone, which he had taken earlier, to call Carl. He asked for the detective's address, and Carl gave it to him without suspecting anything. Meanwhile, Ozg, who had lost sight of Said, decided to go back to Christian's house. She closed all the open doors and windows, thinking Carl might be involved. But when she entered Carl's room, she found him tied up and gagged, realizing that Said was already in the house. At that moment, Said appeared behind Ozg and attacked her until she passed out. A little while later, Ozg started to wake up. She found herself tied up in a room with Said. He had set up gas canisters and a bottle of gasoline. She couldn't fight back. Meanwhile, Christian tried to call Carl using a police officer's phone, but there was no response. He got a bad feeling and decided to go back home, sensing that something was wrong. Back to Said. He seemed determined to make Ozg apologize and show remorse, but she stayed quiet, which made him really angry. So he poured gasoline all over her and set her on fire. Ozg was in agonizing pain, but she tried her best to put out the flames burning her. Eventually, the fire died down. When Said came closer again, to his surprise, Ozg had managed to free her hands. She swiftly attacked him over and over until he couldn't fight back. Furious, Ozg tied him up and stuffed him into the trunk of Carl's car. Then she backed up the car. From inside the trunk, Said, who was still conscious, yelled to be let out, but she sped up and crashed the car into a wall. In the film's climax, the car was on fire, and Ozg tries to get out, but the door gets stuck. She starts panicking, especially when she sees the fire spreading to the back of the car. Luckily, Christian shows up just in time, breaks the window, and pulls her out of the car before it explodes. Moral lesson from the story: don't underestimate a taxi driver turned kickboxing detective, and always make sure you park properly in Vienna.